right, after much travail, which we won't go into, I have the opportunity to talk to Simon Mew. Simon is with the NRDC, and he's their specialist on things like the ZEV credit program in California. And they recently released a report taking a look at what that credit system looks like now that we're beginning to see more electric and plug-in vehicles coming into the market, and how we probably need to think seriously about changing it, and as they say, tuning it up. So we want to talk about that. Welcome to EV World, Simon.
Hi, thank you, Bill. Happy to join you.
Great.
Yeah, you've got it right. It's time for a tune-up of the ZEV program, and in particular, we commissioned a consultant to take a look under the hood of the ZEV program over the past year, and the report is now released and on our website. But basically, the findings are showing that absent a tune-up of the crediting structure, we may be falling well short of the goals here in California, but across 9 other states that have adopted the ZEV program.
Okay, so let's just back up for a minute and explain to people who might be watching this what the ZEV program is. It stands for Zero Emission Vehicles. And how does that bring us up a little bit of speed? I mean, I know it, but there's probably a lot of people who aren't. So tell us what it is.
Yes, the Zero Emission Vehicle program was actually started in 1990 in California, and it set out to require automakers to bring electric drive vehicles into the market, zero tailpipe emission vehicles, ZEVs, into the marketplace. And over the years, obviously, ZEVs were not commercialized by many of the major automakers. This formed the storyline for around Who Killed the Electric Car back in 2001, and then followed up with Revenge of the Electric Car. What we've seen in the past 5 years, though, since the program was updated back in 2012, is that automakers have finally introduced real products into the market to help meet this requirement. California alone has over 20 vehicle model offerings now from electric drive vehicles, more than any other state, a testament to the ability for California to really drive automakers to offer these vehicles. In fact, the 10 ZEV states that have adopted the program today represent 20% of total global sales. So the cumulative sales that have been sold thus far globally have been in these ZEV states. So big outsized impact. One of the challenges, though, is that, as you can guess, the program was created, nearly 2 decades before major products came into the marketplace. And so a lot of the credit structure is frankly outdated. It's based on flexibilities given to manufacturers through many different iterations. We are finding that, for example, when the Air Resources Board, which oversees and administers the program, even in 2011, when they were looking at the program, they were projecting out 100-mile battery electric vehicles well into 2025. And as we know, there are a lot more higher range vehicles coming into the marketplace, approaching 200 or exceeding 200 miles. Now, what that means is that automakers, because they get a lot more credits for these longer range vehicles, they will have to produce and deliver far less numbers.
Ah, okay, interesting.
So the regulation is not based on actually the number of ZEVs delivered to the marketplace. It's actually based on accrediting a credit system, a score, if you may, which allows a lot of different flexibilities, a lot of opportunities that we believe are basically over-crediting for the technologies that frankly, by 2025, we'll be, a decade or two behind where the technology is going. So we've asked ARB, as last week they had a board hearing to hear about their advanced clean car regulations, which the Zero Emission Vehicle program is part of, and environmental groups, health-based groups, some of the science-based groups looking at this, as well as even Tesla. We're all there to share their analysis and their recommendations. One of the recommendations is for ARB to go back and take a look at this issue, come back in December with some options that could tighten up the program, tighten up the system of credit. So going forward, we don't have this compounding problem of a glut of credits. One example of this is our consultant, Chuck Shulock, consulting, who was actually a retired ARB official. We actually needed a former staffer who could really understand the program to take a look at all these different crediting systems. And what he found was that even one automaker alone, if Tesla is even moderately successful with its Model 3 launch, this is sort of the $35,000 price point vehicle that they're introducing in 2017, 2018. If they even had a successful launch, they alone, that one vehicle together with the Model S alone, could basically meet the entire auto industry's obligations, which is a pretty powerful thing, suggesting that the standard really needs to be tightened up. It is far weaker than automakers have been perhaps complaining about.
Okay, well let's try to put that in terms of some numbers, and you started doing that for us. The way this, as I understand it, the way this works is that different kinds of vehicles receive a certain point score, as you point out. So if you're a plug-in vehicle, you might have a certain score of 3 or 4 or whatever it might be. If you're a fuel cell vehicle, you're going to have maybe a score of 6 or 7. And if you're a full battery electric with more than 100 miles range, then you're going to get an 8 or a 9. However, whatever those numbers are. That's typically how it works. But where we're at now is that, as you point out, with those 400,000 Model 3s and the roughly 200,000 or so Model S's and Model 3s and Roadsters out there, that alone allows Tesla to amass a bunch of credits. Do they then just simply sell those credits and that gets the Fords and the GMs and everybody else sort of off the hook?
That is the concern, yes. If the standard isn't tight enough, if there is a large credit glut like we're seeing starting today, that Tesla could indeed, if an automaker chose to, they could basically not produce any ZEVs and allow Tesla, buy the credits and allow Tesla to comply for them. That is not the goal of the program. The goal of the program is to ensure there's enough diversity of products on the marketplace that we really scale up the technology so that we can really hit our air quality targets, reduce pollution, and also the greenhouse gas targets. Of course, that California has very aggressive goals for not just for 2020, but for 2030 as well.
Okay. So if I remember, in looking at the article and the press release that you guys put out, there's sort of a chart in there, and the chart shows this kind of growth that we see. And right now, if we're on track, if no changes are made, that about a 6% growth by around 2025 or something like that, as opposed to where we think they ought to be going, which is like a 15% growth.
Yeah.
So kind of fill that in for me.
Yeah, that's right. So in 2012, when the standard was the last major tightening of the standard, the Air Resources Board determined that the standard was most likely to deliver 15.4% sales, meaning 15% of the sales in California would be a plug-in offering a fuel cell or a fuel cell. That's what the ZEV standard was intended to deliver. Right. And in fact, the governor then assumed that the standard would be delivering, because of that, 1.5 million vehicles on the road. That is part of our state's goal to achieve 1.5 million. What we're seeing because of this large extra overcrediting that we're seeing in the market, that we're only on track to get to about 6% sales in 2025, far short of the 15%. And overall, we'll be achieving only 1 million vehicles instead of 1.5 million. Okay. This is a similar story across the other states that have adopted the Zero Emission Vehicle program. Very similar numbers. In other states, it's about 5% sales by 2025, far short of the higher 15%. And unless we can address this sort of growing credit glut, all these extra crediting provisions within the program, we won't be on track, frankly, to meet our ZEV goals, and it puts us in a very difficult position to hit our longer-term GHG and air quality targets here in California.
Okay. When you see the market, the way the market is developing, when they hadn't even shown the car yet, they got 400,000 orders for the Model 3. We see, for example, you can't get a HOV lane sticker anymore in California. That program was hugely, wildly successful. When it came out, you could get it for a Prius or an EV1 or whatever. And of course, that program's gone away. We're beginning to see some of these incentives sunsetting. I think at, California, you were offering at one time $5,000 and now it's about $2,500. The focus is now shifted to lower income groups to incentivize them and so on. Mm-hmm. So we're beginning to see this shift because this thing is starting to become successful. Do we need then ZEV credits anymore?
We need a floor for the technologies. There's still many barriers to the marketplace. We are still seeing some of the major automakers offer, in some cases, only one product line or sometimes no product line, depending on whether they've actually hit the numbers for the ZEV program and how many credits they've earned. So not all the automakers are jumping in, so to speak. Other automakers are actually well into the ZEV, the ZEV pathway and have longer term plans to really switch to all platforms becoming electric drive to some extent. One example I'll speak of is, for example, BMW in California, including their Mini brand, sold about 7% of their fleet last year was indeed plug-in electric vehicles. So they are already exceeding the sales that the ZEV is essentially requiring in 2025. GM was very close to 6% sales as well in California being plug-in. And that's wonderful. On the flip side, you've got some companies, including Honda and Toyota, well below 1% or in some cases 0%, which is a challenge. So there's a big gap in terms of performance of the automakers, in terms of offering product, market availability of plug-in offerings. So there is still a barrier there that the ZEV program is in fact designed to change. It's designed to encourage all automakers to invest. Ultimately, in terms of all the complementary incentives, all of that, the intent is that all technologies need, in the early market deployment, need support to fully deploy. However, that over time will decrease, and I think it is the intent that this technology hits a tipping point where it becomes truly cost effective versus internal combustion engine vehicle technologies. Some say it already is if you look at the total cost of ownership, including all the fuel savings from using electricity versus gasoline. We are seeing tremendous progress made in battery cost reductions today. In the last 5 years alone, we saw a 65% decrease in the battery costs per unit energy. And what we are seeing going forward is if those trends continue between California, the other 10 ZEV states, as well as China, Europe, markets really scaling up this technology, just like solar, just like wind, we are seeing rapid decreases in costs. And our sense is that based on the data, we could be hitting a tipping point versus internal combustion engines by the mid-2020 time period. So in essence, the ZEV is very critical to get those early deployments out, learning by doing, really build that marketplace that allows consumers to get options for electric drive to make this technology more ubiquitous, make it, as ubiquitous as a moon roof or as an iPod player connection, in your vehicle.
Right. Okay. So what are the changes that you would like to see? I knew that you were proposing some tune-up measures for that. So what's NRDC proposing?
Yeah, our ultimate goal is for ARB to come back with some changes that will help ensure we hit a minimum of 15% sales by 2025 and the 1.5 million goal here in California. Some options to do that. Chuck Schulock in the study we commissioned looked at some options. Some of those options could include simple things like on giving extra credits for range, just basically tightening that up. Currently, under the system, automakers are given a very, what I would call an inflated range for their battery electric vehicles. So, for example, a vehicle that really in the real world might only get 80 miles of range is credited for nearly 130 miles of range, the way the credits work and the way they utilize city cycle driving instead of real world driving. So what we're saying is, okay, you can give extra credits for range, but at least base it off of real world range and not this test cycle that is only urban city, which is gives you a very inflated credit. The other element too is that we are concerned that some automakers may be using all these historical old credits to offset vehicle deployments going forward. So what we're saying is that just make sure that all automakers are meeting at least some of their requirements going forward with real actual vehicle deployments in that year, instead of using all these credits that they may have gotten years ago to meet 100% of their requirement.
Right, right.